What's going on, everybody? My name is Terminus, and today we are going to watch Monogatari off-season, monster season. We're back for another episode, and it is kind of getting late in the season. I can't believe we only have 14 episodes and we're already on episode 8. Like, what? What the fuck? What happened last time? That's a good question. Last time we did start the tale, or maybe more or less start the tale of Acerola Orionhat on the Blade of Shinobu in all of the history, right? All the way back. And we did watch her meet Suicide Master and, Deftopia. And I do wonder how this continues, because this is very interesting. Where did Deftopia go, right? Did she kill her? Did something happen between the two of them, like with Araragi and Shinobu, and did it turn out differently? I'm very curious to that. But first we're gonna look into some of the comments. I'm actually gonna start out with my comments of episode 6.5, because I had a couple of things, minor things I wanted to point out that people wrote. Steve writes about the constellations, and he's saying it's been mentioned in the series before by Ogi and Hitagi Rendezvous. Too lazy to get into all the details, but the constellations are used in allegory for most of the series. There's a lot of related myths. Yes, we did have that in the past, most definitely, especially with kind of Aragi's theme also being in the realm of constellations and astronomy and whatnot. He's been interested in that even beyond that, right? And the looking down at your feet, this was a callback to the prologue of Koyomi Wind. I have to check that out actually again, because it's been a while since I've seen Koyomi Wind. Koyomi Monogatari is structured where all the arcs are metaphorical for the path of life, and Nadeko only timidly stares down at her feet, and on-set paths aimless. Yeah, it would make sense that if you only stare down at your feet, you can't see the road ahead. Right? You don't know what's gonna come ahead because all you're focusing on is not to stumble. And that describes Nadeko very well, in my opinion. Utsukushima, which I assume is probably this interlude that we had with Shinobu here, like that little short story, is a short story which came out when Soku was screened in theaters. They actually handed out the story to people in pamphlets and turned it into a prologue. Soku in book, Ononoki recommends the reader to go read it. If you don't see how this fits into Soku, you need a little refresher. No, I think I even mentioned that in one of my discussions, where I was like, yes, I remember human kiss shot being so alluring that Araragi, when Insoku wasn't able to see her, there was like that veil between the two of them, and when the veil lifted, he was suddenly almost grabbed, right, and couldn't resist. I think it was like, oh, I've been disrespecting her. I need to prostrate myself, kill myself to actually atone for that. And I'm like, oh, what the fuck? But back in the day, we didn't get that. Now we understand like the connection of where this originally comes from. His-shot's first role is 200 years into her vampirism, where she began becoming bored after her four godhood. Yeah, that is like the first, and Araragi is like later at like 500 something years, right? And now she's about 600 years old. And makes perfect sense to me. Also pointing out, as we've already pointed out, Nadeko like Shinobu is Nadeko like in her like physical appearance, in her beauty, and Hanekawa like maybe in her inner beauty. So we do have the double whammy right here. People actually recommend using the MTBB subs. I mainly don't use it because they're coming out pretty late. Like, I think last week they came out pretty early, but other than that, most of the time they come out Tuesday, and then you release it, and somebody like, I don't know, Pink Cubed or whatever, people are gonna watch that anyway. They're gonna be like, oh, whatever, right? I'm gonna, like, one week late, I'm gonna watch it anyway, and he's gonna get similar numbers as he would get if he was watching it right the day after. But somebody like me, who doesn't have as many subscribers yet, and as such YouTube isn't pushing my stuff as much, I think that I would get, or at least the past has kind of shown me that I get significantly lower view numbers if I release an episode half a week or a week after it actually released. So it's very important for me to actually be on time with that. All right, on the main episode last time, episode 7, Carlgo87 writes, I didn't read the novels, but since it's called Monster and Off-Season, then it means there will be arcs from Monster Season as well. Oroka, Nade, and Waza are from Off-Season. I think I remember that there is a story about Shinobu in Monster Season, so it's probably gonna be next. Yeah, I mean, I would assume that this tale we're seeing now is either pretty long or it's not all there is to tell about Shinobu. And I would think that it would be really cool to end it in a Shinobu arc, like this first season of the new Monogatari, basically. I do hope we're gonna get more. I like how it's structured so far. Maybe later by the novel reader is gonna be considered as dumbing down for anime only. It's like with Hana placing in second season or Koyomi in final season, but I feel like it flows really well. I agree, so far it's been flowing really well, though I'm not sure about Tsukiya and Undo. Tsukiya Undo directly sets up Nadeko draw. Yeah, it kinda does, but I don't think it's necessary, like in my opinion. And Shinobu scene at the end of it draws some parallels to between Sengoku and Shinobu, gives even more layers and hints at some hidden depth, which we are gonna be exploring now in the Waza, I assume. Yeah, I assume the same. You mentioned that maybe in the next arc we may see Suicide Master. No, actually, I answered to that and I was like, no, I think I didn't mention that. Maybe I did it unintentionally. Maybe that was like what came across, but I didn't think Suicide Master would be in the next one. I thought that maybe it would be a further telling of Shinobu's tale. Pretty sure the end of this arc, Azorial and Suicide Master are gonna merge somehow. That is a very interesting theory, right? The actual merging of them. Someone is gonna eat somebody. Pause. Maybe both at the same time. Pause. Oh yeah, you made the joke. I'm sorry. I took it away from you. Well, they straight up tell us that eating Azorial is the end goal. Yeah, she did, in a way. I think Dystopia will find a way to consume her literally, but Azorial's essence will consume Suicide Master in return. That is a very, very, not as founded, but a plausible theory, in my opinion. It's also plausible that they just kind of, right, become master and thrall or minion, and then the minion overtakes the master, and we have something like I've been saying, like with Kishshot and Araragi in Kizumonogatari, but a different outcome of that, where Suicide Master doesn't stay and Shinobu actually gets or stays behind after having killed her or whatever that's gonna be like. There's too many similar traits between Deftopia and Kishshot that Kaka, she gotta be living inside her in some way. Well, maybe she's just gonna carry on the legacy. That's also we have to keep into account that maybe on some of these things, actually behaviors might be inherited by the minions. We don't know if that's not the case, that certain behavioral tendencies are being passed down to the next one who is being made. If you look like at human psychology, for example, there's generally 3 pathways on which behavior can be passed down from parent to child, which is genetics on the one hand, right? And we do have that connection, even though it's not literally genetics, but if we are turning somebody into a thrall, into a minion as a vampire, it would mean that we're modifying them on a biological level, and it would make sense that maybe some of like the characteristics, especially if we see like Araragi and Kishshot with the superpowers and what kind of powers got passed on for him, for example, him surviving in the bear sun, or him being able to regenerate super quickly, which is different from what normal as, in quotation marks, normal as vampires are capable of. It isn't too far-fetched to see that behavior is going to be passed on in that way as well. The second path is mainly just the behavioral one, right? If you spend a lot of time with somebody, if you have a lot of positive feelings for somebody, if you observe a lot of behavior of that person, you might be prone to start acting like them in some degree because you admire them, or because you see their behavior being effective and functional in some way, and you adopt that for yourself. And the third one is kind of a little bit more complicated, which is kind of a reaction between genes and the environment, which is genes making you prone to be very receptive for certain things, and then the environment coming and reinforcing that, right? Triggering that gene expression in a way in order to actually get into the pathway. A lot of models of like cognitive disorders and whatnot do involve this indirect passive gene expression and environmental interaction as a cause or something that keeps up the maladapted behavior that we're seeing, but that can also apply to actual positive or neutral or useful behavior, right? So I can see that being like ending in any possible conceivable way, really. Not sure how the themes are gonna work with that setup. Probably related to you know, the unaliving thing. I said the name a couple of times, I don't want to say it too often. And loneliness. Interesting how Deftopia has that word in her name already. Doubt it's without any deeper meaning. It's probably gonna mirror Kisha and Araki relationship in Kizu to a degree. Two lonely damaged beings finding each other, bond, and then kill and save each other in some way. Yeah, I assume the same, right? I assume like this is probably also why Kishot in the beginning had such a bond to Araki and kind of felt that connection and was like, did want to maybe even in the end sacrifice herself for him, right? Him being the successor, taking over the vampirism, and her being like dying finally, being released of all of this, but it didn't turn out that way because Araki is Araki. Acerola seemingly selfish decision not to die even though her existence literally causing genocide is really interesting. Maybe it's a very peculiar way to say that that thing isn't a way even in the most extreme circumstances. There's always a better way. Not sure if it works here, but definitely food for thought. Maybe it's contrasting with Deftopia's nonchalant attitude towards killing herself. Although I said something along those lines, and I think she doesn't have that much of a nonchalant attitude. She takes responsibility. She takes this as something important in a way. I mean, she hasn't been going around killing the whole kingdom, right? She's been kind of like de facto ruling the kingdom and kind of, I mean, obviously taking advantage and hunting prey, but at the same time upholding societal structures. Maybe mirrors Araki in a way a bit. Not sure if there's a problem with Deftopia. Maybe I'm just overcooking, but suicide in her name gotta have some deeper meaning. Yeah, it probably does have a deeper meaning, but I think it's maybe more a mirror meaning, and a meaning in a way that, like, her entire title is related to death, right? Like I don't know what it was, like the short death or whatever it was, right? And her title is generally death related. I think like the Suicide Master comes from maybe just a thing that we will, after the entire arc, look back on and be like, oh, now it makes sense. But at the same time, it wouldn't have made sense for her to choose that title in the very beginning before all of this even happened. But I could be wrong there. Anyway, really interesting arc. Didn't plan to write such a long ass comment. I haven't even listened to your discussion yet. Just wanted to write a couple thoughts, got carried away. Hey, look, man, I'm writing a lot of novels everywhere on the internet, so I'm always appreciative if somebody just writes interesting comments. Emmanuel actually says here, Acerola's decision not to kill herself is, if we are to believe her words, an altruistic one. Yeah, she's saying that. She's saying a patient's hero she should not commit, as a little force or push anyone else that might get the illness down the line to take their own life, since that would be the only known solution, which is why she says she has to keep going until she finds an alternate solution so other people can have another solution. Yeah, I think like somebody else mentioned this, and I don't know who mentioned it. Andrew actually said a very interesting comment, and something I maybe forgot. I didn't pick up on it exactly in the interlude story, but she wasn't a princess in the beginning, but a normal civilian. And thanks to her beauty, she got elevated to kind of a royalty status, which is insane. And the numbers are actually chapter counts, which is what, because it's a short story, it's shorter chapters. I wouldn't assume so, right? I just would assume that it's less chapters, but apparently the way the story is structured, chapters in that way. Or maybe, and actually it's not a short story, it's not the interlude, so I'm very curious about how that is, because the chapters are rolling in like crazy, so I would be interested to see how that relates to the light novel and how short the chapters actually are within that. Simon, thanks for the comment. I actually read that one. I don't want to highlight it too much. There's nothing in there just like that I haven't mentioned already. But this is like 2 points that Simon and Nilu both made, but Nilu makes like the longer point because he seems to be, or they seem to be very adamant about this. Yeah, there we go, at the end of this. Also, I just want to personally say I really have a heavy dislike for when people imply in their interpretation that Kishot somehow lured Araki in to help her through her vampiric charisma, or from the perspective of this arc, the Curse of Beauty. In Kizu, it is just so thematically opposed to her story and to Araki's character as well. Araki is not drawn in by anything intrinsic to Kishot, but by his own drive to help people. He cannot ignore a woman crying for help, weeping on the floor. He does not get lured by her beauty or vampiric charm. It is his own nature which draws him to her. So it has nothing to do with her beauty, charisma, and everything to do with Aragi's mindset helping people. You've pointed out the crying baby in the movie before, but to me this is not meant to portray Kishot somehow luring him in, but Aragi's instinctual need to help someone which he just cannot ignore no matter how hard he tries. And I can see that, right? I can partially agree with that, be like, okay, maybe all of this is metaphor. For me personally, when I watched the movie for the first time, my interpretation was the luring, like the baby crying was her not purposefully, but subconsciously applying her supernatural powers in a way in order to make her seem more sympathetic. The baby crying is very subliminal, and it is something we can very hardly ignore, right? Because it's a very uncomfortable thing to hear a baby crying. So I would assume that maybe that is her vampiric powers in a way, but obviously in my for my personal experience, that would not take away from the fact that it is Araragi himself who feels that pressure, that extreme pressure to help people and not ignore people in need. And I don't think that takes away too much from the story, though. For some people it might, and I can see how they want to interpret that more in a metaphorical way, and that the baby crying is more just the underlying tone of Araragi feeling that immense pressure to help somebody helpless in that specific situation. I never thought it was the beauty. I thought it was like, oh damn, Araragi was actually not affected that much in Kizu, so how, right? I was asking myself the question, what happened between now, right, episode 7 and Kizu that made Kishot lose her ability to tempt people, to lure them in? Is it maybe the vampirism that countered that? That was my theory last time. So it might be, it might not be, but it's going to be very interesting to see how her powers and the way people perceive her and her character changes over the course of this arc. You said that Azarola's behavior seems selfish to you, but I say her behavior cannot be selfish by literal definition because it would not be beautiful to be selfish, okay? Everything she does is always the most beautiful option to take. Now, mind you, beautiful and correct aren't synonymous here, but the reason she's on this journey to find a soul to save is because it is the beautiful thing to do. Giving up, killing yourself, or anything akin to that would not be beautiful. Now, I would argue, and I think somebody else said that too. No, nobody said that here, but I would argue that it can also be seen, depending on what person writes it, the beautiful thing to sacrifice yourself so other people don't have to suffer anymore. But I understand where your train of thought is coming from, and I think in this particular case, I even agree that it is in terms of like narratives and stories and whatnot, right? If you tell tales and myths, then it's the more beautiful thing to do, to actually go in search, to find the cure and whatnot, and recluse yourself to a life of loneliness and anxiety and trying to avoid people so you don't kill them, and everything I touch is gonna die, stuff like that, and actually then maybe find a way to save someone with that. But I don't know how this is gonna continue. Also, we have, like Nilo also says, that Wazamonogatari's applicable translation is Wazamono for sharp sword, which makes perfect sense to me, right? We have a lot of connection between Shinobu and sharp sword. First of all, Shinobu, or Kishot in this case, Asarola, has this effect on people that they kind of off themselves as a result of experiencing her and her beauty and whatnot. That could be sharp sword. The second sharp sword is Dream Spawn and Hot Spawn, you know, I forgot the Japanese name. It was a very beautiful Japanese name. Either way, Dream Spawn and Hot Spawn, which she formed, right, as her weapons and whatnot. So there's that connection as well. And obviously a vampire would also be a sharp sword. So in a way, in an indirect way. So yeah, really cool stuff. I think we went through all of the comments now. We can kind of just get back to watching the show. I don't have that much time today, so I do hope I can get my initial reaction as well as the discussion covered, but it's possible that the reaction will be a little bit less. It's probably, looking at the time right now with the pre-discussion, we're probably gonna be looking at an hour, right? So it's like 10-20 minutes, maybe less than what we would have, and then the discussion is probably gonna be as per usual. We're gonna maybe keep it a little bit shorter, on like 30 seconds or 30 minutes or 40 minutes. But that highly depends on how much visual metaphors this episode is gonna bring in. Maybe I'm gonna make it short here, and next episode, I'm gonna go a little bit deeper into it in the pre-discussion. We'll see about that, but let's get this party started, shall we? Monogatari of Monster Season, episode 8 starts in... wait, I need to actually put that up and put the volume down as I am supposed to. Wazamonogatari episode 0, Acerola Bon Appetit part 2, off-season Monster Season number 8 starts in a 3, 2, 1. Bam! And chapter 10. Alright. In the dark of the night. And we repeat what we said before. It cannot be called a curse. Alright. In a way, innate. Alright. It exists, but it was made visible. As we see from the story, right? She's being stubborn. Holy shit. And he... She cannot contain herself. I love that, right? With the angles, and it's almost like a cross. Ooh, okay, so we have like a reference to her name. Okay. 11. New approach. Okay, how do you want to do that? Ooh, okay, I need to change myself. Yeah, it is who you are innately. Right. Stop being beautiful, dude. Stop being beautiful. Pretend. Ooh, yeah. Stop doing things that are beautiful. Right? Act like me. Rejecting, right? Ooh, alright. This is going against her nature, right? Even Washi, it's not even Watashi. Wakatta no ja. Yeah. Rules. Is this when she comes up with Kiss Shot? Acerola is, I think, a fruit, right?
見せかけの美しさにとらわれない呪いをかけられた美し姫に対して見せかけの見苦しさを仕掛けようとは
Superficial.
というよりはそこまで至ると一種の風刺でございますね。スーサイドマスター
Died, fainted because of starvation.
まさか私めが気づかないうちに餓死されておりませんよね。
それよりトロピカレスク、貴様の情報収集の収穫はあったのか？
いえ、申し訳ありません、スーサイドマスター。何せ王国民が全滅しておりますので。
It's hard to get information if you can't talk to anybody.
収集の範囲を広げようと考えております。美し姫の故国を訪ねてみるのも良いかと愚行しております。
I mean, it might be. Ooh, I love this shot. Like with the cool blue atmosphere. There's no lights. Is she trying to kill herself? Ooh. What burned her here? Silver?
スーサイドマスター、バカか貴様。なぜ今さらここに来ていきなり命を粗末にするような真似をする。
I think she wasn't.
スーサイドマスター。あ、いえ、誤解じゃ、スーサイドマスター。決して私は、いえ、わしは自殺しようとしたわけではないのです。ないのじゃ。ただ、もしもああやって片目をえぐり取れば。
She would be more ugly.
そう、海賊っぽくて箔がつくのではないかと思いまして、思ったのじゃ。
二度とするな。あ、努力は認めるが、やや的外れだな。
A little bit far.
箔をつけるにしても、はったりを聞かせるにしても、それはあくまでも振りであって、見せかけであるべきだ。本当に傷を負ってどうする？それでは貴様に命を捧げた人間どもとやっていることは同じではないか。貴様は美し姫で亡くなるにあたって一切の犠牲を払ってはならないのだ。
Yeah, sacrifice is beautiful, right?
解決しようというのと同じだ。
そうですね。その通りでした。すみませんでした。スーサイドマスター、反省します。この通りです。
Way too polite.
また言葉遣いが乱れているぞ。いや、乱れておらんぞ。
そうでした。そうじゃった。悪かったの、スーサイドマスター。
I see it.
等間隔に散らかっている。制作者のセンスを隠しきれていない。
It's so hard to go against your nature.
何がおかしいのですか？
いや何、貴様にお手本を見せてやっただけだ。それこそ箔のつくかっこいい笑い方のお手本をな。貴様笑ったことがないのか？
私がうかつに笑うと国が滅びますから。
じゃあアセロラ姫、貴様はこれからは俺様が見せてやったお手本を
Okay.
払えばいい。
Right, we see the connections.
カカというあれですか？あれかの。
それだ、こうだ。
I don't know what it's exact, but I think it's more like a cackle. It's supposed to be a cackle.
それでよかろう。その笑顔なら誰も死んだりはせん。
ありがとうございます。
Ooh.
いえ、苦しゅうない。
Better, better. It's becoming very clear how Shinobu acts in present times even. I do wonder if she would act differently.
こともあろうか。アセロラ姫を突き飛ばしたというのに無傷だ。
カカ。
And she's starting to like her. Oh no. Like really like her, not in a like oh how beautiful kind of way.
また死んでしまったらしい。
Ooh, she's losing form. Can she die a final death?
やめられるか。 食事を味わうことができるのだ。
恐れながら申し上げます。マスターはあの人間の世話をするうちに愛着が芽生えたのではありませんか。
どういう意味だ？
Yeah, she's getting smaller, definitely.
この死体上で飼い続けるおつもりではないのかとお尋ねしているのでございます。
I mean, it's a good question, but she's gonna be annoyed.
お答えください。
そんなことはどうでもいいから、さっさと報告をしろ。
Still love the reflections.
ありませんでした。以前申し上げました通り、国境を越えて美し姫の故国にも足を伸ばしたのですが、対策の打ちようがなく、噂話でさえほとんど集まらないありさまでした。
ほとんどと言ったな。ならば少しは得るものはあったのではないか。
まあ、それは少しならば。しかしそれはわざわざお話しするのもバカバカしいような童話の類でして。
童話？結構ではないか。美し姫とて童話だろう。いいから話してみ。
Right, so what is this fairy tale?
童話というわけでもなく、一般的な人間社会の伝承なのでございますが。
Alright.
お姫様にかけられた呪いを解くのは王子様のキスしかないと古くより定められているそうなのでございます。
That is a very common fairy tale, I guess.
トロピカレスクの指摘はまるっきり的外れじゃないにしても、今はまだ俺様の気持ちを含
But it isn't a curse, right?
可能性を残しておいた方がいい。だがそうだな。そろそろあいつの新しい名前を決めてやってもいい頃が来るかもしれない。
Alright.
さながら東洋の刀のように美しく輝く心を持つあの女には、
Like a sword from the Orient.
どんな名前がふさわしいのか。ああ、そうだ。キスで呪いが解けるってのは考えるだにバカバカしい発想だが、しかし験担ぎとして、あるいは魔除けとして、その文字を名前のどこかに含ませておくってのは結構。
Alright, so a superstitious thought that goes into that, right? Kind of acknowledging that our thoughts are changing how we perceive things.
また死んでしまったらしい。
What, you keep dying? Holy shit.
例によって死ぬ時のことはよく覚えていないのだが、感覚的には最近は一晩に2度3度餓死しているような。
It's getting harder and harder. You're like a doll at this point. You only have nothing. The flame is fading. She looks mangled. I don't like that. What happened here?
スーサイドマスター、
何も言わなくていい。
生き返るのですよね。あなたと同じ
Will he though?
好きなのですから。この方もすぐに生き返るのですよね。
こいつは俺様と同じ吸血鬼とは言えない。
So he might not.
元人間で生命力も再生力も俺様にはまだまだ遠く及ばない。
そんな。スーサイドマスタ
So
ー。
she killed somebody.
死に続けていれば、いずれは死ぬということですか。
ああ、無限に死ねるわけじゃね
Is she gonna starve herself literally?
え。食事が命がけなのは当たり前のことだ。そして
Yeah, she's too involved emotionally.
貴様のせいではない。
いいえ、私がここに来なければ、この方は死な
And
い。
he stepped in and probably died of his own volition.
納得していただけたようですね。それでは失礼いたします。スーサイドマスタ
And
ー。
she's speaking politely again.
二度とお会いすることはないでしょう。
わかった。それでいい。もう止めない。好きにしろ。だがそれでも少しだけ待ってくれ。俺様が食事をとる間だけそこを動かないでくれ。貴重な食材を踏まれたくない。こいつを踏んでいいのは俺様だけだ。
Okay. So she consumes him, right? We're gonna look at that later.
食することによって、この方の死は無意味でも無
It
駄にな
is.
くなるのです。
In a way, what she's doing is beautiful too.
してしまったこの方の死が。
待たせたな、アセロラ姫。もう行っていいぞ。まあ、もう二度と会うことはないとまで思い詰めることはない。トロピカレスクを食って腹いっぱいになったことだし、俺様もあと何回かくらいは余裕で死んでやれるから、旅することに疲れたらいつでも会いに来ればよい。
スーサイドマスター、お願いがあります。私を吸血鬼にしてください。
Ooh, and this is where it comes.
本気か、いや正気か。
はい、私は吸血鬼になりたいのです。
はあ、
私に命を捧げようとする彼らを止める術を今の私は知りません。そんな方法はないのかもしれない。
But
ならば私は捧げられた彼らの命を
ooh, right. I have a way to actually make them matter.
彼らの命を無駄にしたくはありません。
Don't want to waste them.
私が殺した命は
That's a beautiful action too, though.
私は彼らを食べたいのです。
And she takes on her philosophy.
私を吸血鬼にしてください。私の血を吸ってください。スーサイドマスター。
どういうことになるか分かっているのか。貴様は二度と日の当たる場所は歩けなくなるのだぞ。
Mm.
一切承知の上でこうしてお願いしているのです。
And it's sacrifice, right?
ことになる。
分かっております。一切承知の上でこうしてお願いしているのです。
She's kind of prolonging her life.
伝わった。見事だと思うし、答えてやりたいとも思う。
では、
だが無理だ。
How?
増えないのと同じ意味で、貴様を眷属とすることは俺様にはできない。
Can you not?
貴様の柔肌に深々と牙を突き立てるのには違いない。
And you couldn't forgive yourself for that.
私が自ら望んでいるのだとしても無理なのでしょうか。
That's what I was asking.
極論を言えば、貴様の気持ちも、貴様の意識も、貴様の望みも
I don't know if that's true.
ないのだ。
Maybe it's your own personal feelings speaking. To be honest.
スーサイドマスター、私の意識は関係ないとおっしゃいましたね。覚えていますか？私が愚かにも自らの眼球をつこうとした時のことを。あの時、あなたは食材を奪う一方で私をベッドへと突き飛ばしました。
ああ、そうだったな。それがどうした？
どうして突き飛ばせたのだと思いますか？
Ooh, yeah.
突き飛ばした先がベッドだったからだろ。貴様がノーダメージだったから、俺様もノーダメージだったんだ。
ノーダメージではありませんでした。
うん
結構痛かったです。今も胸の真ん中にあなたの手形がくっきりと残っています。
She's logicking her way into this.
今あなたがおっしゃった話を聞いて、
She's trying to convince her.
仮説が生まれました。
Okay. We're figuring it
私
out.
の意識は関係なく、周囲の意識こそが重要であるならば、あの時自分の眼球を差し貫こうとする私の気持ちを無視する形で行われたあなたの攻撃は攻撃とはみなされなかった。 つまりあなたが私のために私を思って、
Yeah, it would maybe be possible. Yes! Alright.
それこそが下ごしらえになるということです。
She needs to change her thinking, right? That's what she said in the beginning of the episode. Change the way you think about it.
では、ふつつかものですが、よろしくお
It's like a
願い
wedding
します。
dress.
スーサイドマスター。
A little bit.
ふつつか者にはありえない度胸だよ。確かに人間にしておくには惜しい。
ご期待に添えるよう努力します。我が主様。
Wakarushi-sama.
だからといってそんな口の利き方をする必要はないんだぞ、アセロラ姫。奴隷制はトロピカレスクで廃止する。あいつが俺様の最後の奴隷だ。
さようですか。では、私はあなたのことを何とお呼びすれば？
これまで通りのスーサイドマスターでいい。お互い生きていたらの話だが。
Yeah, it's unclear how this experiment
俺
goes.
様の眷属である以上、俺様に恥じない吸血鬼であってくれればいい。この世界がお上品に戻っているぞ。 俺様が教えてやった迫のある笑い方はどうした？
そうでした。緊張なんてしていません。いえ、しておらぬわ。私
Yeah.
わしはウヌを信じておるのじゃ。
信じて。
Ore.
おいおい、真面目なシーンで笑かすな。人を信じるのは美徳なのだろうが、俺様は人じゃなくて化け物だぞ。
I love the lighting.
化け物になろうとするものです。あなたのように
I want to become like you.
あなたのようにクールでハードで、そして優しくも美しい吸血鬼に。
Interesting what impression she has of her. Kind and
なれるさ。
beautiful.
アセロラ姫。キスショットアセロラオリオンハートアンダーブレード。
Ooh, this is the name.
キスショット。貴様のために死んでいく人間を口づけでもするように食ってやる。
Ooh.
永遠の命を得て長生きすれば、ひょっとしたらそのうち奇特な王子様に出会えるかもしれんしな。
キスショットアセロラオリオンハートアンダーブレード。
I'm wondering about the Orion, right? The Orion.
気に入りました。スーサイドマスター。デストピアビルトゥオーゾ。
Gotta be a constellation thing.
最高です。とても嬉しいです。あなたに、そしてあなたがくれたこの名前に恥じない吸血鬼となるよう努力します。
It's funny, they're deluding themselves into this.
そうそう、精進といえば最後のレッスンだ。とても嬉しいときはこう笑え。はっはっはっはっはっはっ。
And that's our title. And she was able to do it, holy shit.
何のことはない。殺して食う、殺して愛する。食うことと愛することは同じ。
Eating and loving meant the same thing. Wow. 20. And this is way in the future from that.
そんなわけで、かつてローラと呼ばれていた貴族の娘は、その昔美し姫と呼ばれていたお姫。
Laura, okay, that's her original name. And she's telling the story. So where is she right now?
あいつは人間を食う化け物になったし、俺様もこうして生きている。結局のところ、俺様があいつに抱いていた情ってやつが友情だったのか愛情だったのか、それとも烈情だったのかわからずじまい。
Maybe it was all of it.
まあ、それが食欲でなくって、そのおかげでなくともうまくいったんだから何でもいいさ。美味しい思いもできたしな。
Delicious affair.
今となってはもう600年近く前の。
And she's telling it in the present, so she must be alive, right?
その後の動向は噂でしか知らんが。
Ooh.
あいつは素晴らしい吸血鬼になった。鉄血にして、熱血にして、冷血の吸血鬼。キスショットアセロラオリオンハートアンダーブレード。
600 years.
禁眼、怪異殺しの怪異の王。一度くらい聞いたことはあるだろう。最近仕入れた噂によると、キスショットもとうとう極東の島国で。
Of course that would rouse something.
退治されたとか。いやはや、これは極めて信憑性の低いガセだと思われる。
I need to confirm this.
全然心配なんてしていねえけれども。どれここは一つ600年ぶりに。
I knew it, I fucking knew it.
ハードでクールに積もる童話もあるだろう。
Ooh, but this gonna be trouble. But also Oh, we don't have an OP, we don't have an ED, what the fuck? What is this arc? Holy shit. And it's continuing probably, right? Because we didn't have an arc OP yet, we didn't have an arc ED, or we had like our ED with like the second verse of Undead, but we're gonna jump right into probably monster season. Maybe that's the split, right? So it's like the beginning tales is off season, and then we jump into monster season, and we're gonna have Deftopia coming to see us. Holy, this is gonna be something very interesting. It's gonna be something very cool. All right, that was a way too short Monogatari Off and Monster season. Episode 8. Asarola Bon Appetit. Episode 2. Right? Part 2. Just a two-parter with an interlude, like short story in the beginning. But that's fine. That's fair enough. We don't have that much art to look at in this specific episode. But I would say that we go over it anyway, right? We do have a couple of things that we can look through. Maybe a couple of wordings and whatnot. It's not going to be as explicit, and I'm probably not going to do a discussion. It's going to hurt my watch numbers. Who the fuck cares? Who the fuck cares? Right. Yeah. Let's take a look. Let's boom get it. No. Let's boom get it on the screen. We start out in a throne room. There's not that much to be said. Aside from, like, I really like the flower symbolism when they talk about her beauty, right? And it's innate, right? It's something that comes from the inside, that was already there. It's the same with what we had with Hanekawa. She already has that beauty inside of herself. But with Hanekawa, the difference was, though, that Hanekawa was shoving all of her ugliness away. While with Asarola, I don't even know if it exists, right? We don't know if it exists, or if she has to create it out of thin air, right? Have to fake it until she makes it, basically. But she is stubborn as fuck, and she's like, she's gonna be the first thing in my stomach. I'm not gonna eat anything before her, but she's not, right? I mean, technically, right? She's gonna suck her blood and whatnot, but she's not eating her. I do love this shot. I do love this symbolism shot where we do have like the blood splatters all the way on her front side, not back side, mind you. Everything is a little bit dark and candlelit, but the main aspect of this is like this cross section here, like whatever that is. It looks like some kind of like structural rafters or whatnot, or pillars that kind of fell down, and like part of the Gothic cathedral aesthetic. And what we like, it's forming a cross, and it almost kind of reminds me of the cross of episode in Kizumonogatari, right? The way he kind of put it just in the ground, and it was there, right? And he was holding it like very diagonally, and it also kind of cuts off like very artistically that part of the room, which is Asarola and everything, and the other part of the room, which is behind her. I don't know what it specifically could symbolize in this, right? But it's vaguely very reminiscent of some of the scenes we've seen, and very interesting in general. I do still love like the half shadow shots, which still depict her as somewhat of a sinister kind of creature, but at the same time we get to know more and more that Deftopia in her like purest form is becoming very attached to Asarola, be that due to her beauty or be that due to her, I mean, the problem in this conceptualization is that not only is she beautiful in how she looks and how the aesthetics of her are, but also how she acts and the kind of character, the person she is. So if you would, for example, draw up a scenario in which the two of them are almost at a lover status, right, where she is in love with her, then we can still not be sure if we attribute that to her supernatural beauty or if we attribute that to what she is in character, because the two of them are one and the same, right? Her supernatural beauty is what she was born with. There is nothing like artificial or fake or cursy about this, as we learn in this episode. It's just what she is, which is insane, because then everybody kind of loves her in a way, right? Genuinely loves her. But we have a brilliant idea, which is you have to change the way you are. And this is where all of our discussion from the pre-discussion, I'm happy I made this discussion, came in. It is try to change the way you act, and maybe in the process of that, you change the way people perceive you. But there's an interesting fact that is connected to that, and that is that, first of all, it's very hard to change who you are at the fundamental level, right? Your little characteristics, your rituals, your behaviors, your subtleties. But also, the more you change that, in many experiments throughout like the different decades where psychology existed, we have looked at things like consciousness, right? And how our brain works and all of that. And it's very interesting that a brain kind of doesn't know what, like a logical side of the brain obviously does know what action and reaction is, right? We know the direction and the functioning of causation, but the brain doesn't know causation when it comes to our own actions and the way we talk and everything. This is why positive reinforcement can work to a degree. Obviously, if you really lean into it and you don't overdo it and it's not overly fake, if you try to change your behavior, it can in turn change the processes that underline your behavior, right? Because our brain is oftentimes switching around causation and reaction, right? In a way, this can lead to a person acting a certain way, right? And displaying their own self, their characteristics, putting on a mask, and suddenly you, at some point in time, you realize you are not sure where the mask begins and where yourself ends, right? It gets confounded, the lines get blurry, and you start kind of becoming what you are pretending to be. A lot of that comes up in fiction a lot when it comes to like undercover investigations, or when it comes to being involved in criminal networks, or when you fall in love with somebody, right? You maybe change in a way that is not originally not you, but the more you display that behavior, the more it reflects back on you and kind of changes fundamental things within your brain, fundamental like pathways that lead the way for you easier and more subconsciously displaying these behaviors, these characteristics as natural. Which is very interesting if we look at the causation of how these things can lead to like how defensive behaviors and functional adaptations to stress, to trauma, to other things can lead to us showing certain behaviors that are meant to protect us mainly, which then though go in over time, move into the subconscious and move into what is our identity, and then define the person we are, despite us maybe originally not having been that way. The problem is that society still sees that as, okay, this is a fundamental characteristic, they probably were born this way, right? Society often attributes that, much like the brain attributes stuff like that, right? Is this me? Is this not me? This is a very difficult struggle to kind of parse apart. But yeah, there's been fascinating experiments. You can look those up. I don't know like the general names of experiments, but for example, just a video I recently saw, which was referencing one of those experiments, was that they made experiments on epilepsy patients they had in, I think the 70s it was, or something along those lines. And they started to kind of separate the two halves of the brain from one another for patients that had very strong epilepsy strokes, right? Or not strokes, stroke is something else, but very, very prominent bouts of epilepsy that would jump across the entire brain. And there's one big bridge in the middle of our brain that is called the corpus callosum, which is connecting all of these nerves from the different sides of our brain to one another, and are different, like the two sides of our brain are responsible for different things. For example, if I remember correctly, hopefully I'm not saying this wrong now, because the left side of the brain is very much responsible, for example, for speech and words and whatnot, and the right side of our brain, for example, would be responsible for creative endeavors. I hope I don't mix those two up. For example, if we like drawing something or whatever. Obviously, there's overlap, and some things are represented in both sides of our brains, and people who maybe have brain damage on one side of the brain can develop these abilities or redevelop these abilities by using adjacent parts of the brain or the other side because on the other side, sometimes there is structures that are similar but less developed, right? So you do have like a big structure that is responsible for a certain thing on this side of the brain, and on the other side of the brain, you do have that structure, but it's very tiny and not developed because this side of the brain most of the time takes that over, right? Like is responsible for that. But if this is damaged, it can be that on the other side of the brain, there's some development to compensate for that. But either way, they started to split the brain in order to avoid that electrical potentials, right? Electrical signals that were kind of going haywire in one side of the brain where the epilepsy started could jump over to the other side of the brain, because obviously if your entire brain is just kind of misfiring, that is even worse than if one side is. And they started to do that, and what they realized after a time of observation and like doing different studies and whatnot, they observed that oftentimes these two sides of the brain, if they're separated, they would act independently, right? The right side of the brain, like for example, being shown, right, we're not going to go into this very, very deeply, but for example, the eyes, the optical nerves are very complicated because they cross the sides of the brain and kind of go into the opposite side of the brain for processing and whatnot. And oftentimes they would use that in experiments where they would show one side of the, like one eye, they would show a certain thing while keeping the other eye covered, and then they ask certain things of them. For example, can you draw me that thing that is being shown to you right now? And for example, if you're on the right side of the brain, maybe you would, for example, say there is nothing, because you wouldn't have a term for actually something being there, because you can't connect with the left side of the brain that is having all of these words for things that you know saved within them, right? Within it, right? And then, but the right side would start drawing that thing, and the left side, right, like you talking and speaking about things and reflecting on things would suddenly be like, if you were asked, wait, why is your right hand drawing this? The interesting thing, you wouldn't say, I don't know, but you would more try to explain why it's doing that by following some kind of logical path that often is very plausible, but is sometimes just not applicable at all. So you have different things being shown. For example, they showed two different pictures that are somehow connected, right? Snow and a shovel or whatnot, and the other side is being shown something different, and then the right side starts drawing the shovel, and you're showing that to the left side or to the person and asking them with their capability of speech and words and whatnot on the left side, asking them why is the right side drawing this, and they would explain, for example, not with the snow that they didn't see, right, didn't observe, didn't have the connection, but they would explain it with something they saw on the other side, right? I'm kind of like, I think, confusing the two of them here when I'm talking about it, because obviously when we're talking about how something is perceived, if you show something to the right eye mainly, right, it means you're showing it to the left side of the brain. If you're showing something to the left eye, you're showing it to the right side of the brain. So it's a little bit confusing, because brain be confusing in its anatomical structure. But aside from that, it's very interesting to see that technically a lot of the different areas of our brain have semi-consciousness, right, and exist in isolation, and then we do have all of these pathways that connect to one another and talk to one another, and only through that connection we can also actually be a cohesive self in a way, right, and understand ourselves as a being that is complete, right? And that kind of relates to what we're seeing here, which is, since there's certain areas of our brain and parts of our consciousness, let's say it like that, who is trying to explain the actions that we are performing, even in the case where we don't exactly know why we're performing these actions, right? In this case of like the split brain, where the left is split from the right side, there's an area in the left side when we're asked, we're gonna try and start to explain why something is happening, and oftentimes we're wrong. We're just making up things in a logical way, right? It would make sense for me to do this in this way because of that, right? Despite us not having all the information and us actually not being able to clearly tell, yes, that is the case, but that part of our brain is actually doing it in a matter-of-factly way and saying, yes, of course, I'm doing this because of that, and that makes sense for us, and we see that as the truth, right? So it's very interesting if we start showing behavior that is not in line with who we actually are, that this can have an effect on who we are, right? It can change us as a human being on a fundamental level. Now, obviously, it's not that simple. I can't just keep saying everything is fine, everything is good, I'm great, right? I'm feeling super happy, and that's just how it's gonna be. But if I'm trying to think more positively, that can long-term affect the way I think about things, I perceive things, the way I interact with people and with the world. And this is where this positive reinforcement thinking is coming from. The general idea of trying to change your behavior in that way. And it's the same for any kind of other behavior that has an influence of how we see ourselves in terms of identity and how we interact with people and who we are. And this is what Suicide Master is trying to do with her here, right? She's trying to get into her head and trying to change the way she acts, right? Fake it till you make it. And we come back to Kaiki. The fake is more real than the real thing, right? Because the fake at least is trying to be as close as possible to the real thing. Or not to the real thing, but rather to the thing to the ideal that the real thing is actually striving to wholeheartedly, right? So oftentimes the fake can actually, in trying and attempting to fake as well as possible, can make a better job at the one who is actually real, right? The one who actually desires to be that way, right? From the bottom of their heart, but maybe doesn't manage to do it completely. I do love these little cut-ins of the painted, the really painted thing. Somebody pointed out that maybe last time it might have been the case that we did have some AI art in there. I also noticed that the production quality is not quite as high as it could be, and it's very non-shaft. So we don't have a lot of head tilts, we don't have those little flash-ins, we don't have the weird and interesting angles. We do have a couple of them, and I do think maybe those are key art pieces that are dictated by Shaft. But somebody said that this was like parts of these were outsourced to another company, which I can very well see, right? It's very good still in terms of how it presents itself, how it keeps the atmosphere and whatnot, but I can see how a lot of this is not as seeping in pure raw artistic energy the same way the previous arc, Wazamonogatari, for example, was with how Shaft was doing things there. But it makes sense. This is a different story in a different time, maybe also kind of perceived in a different way. We do look at something like that and think, very interesting. Can we believe everything? Because the interlude itself already said it. Don't believe everything at face value. See it as a myth. See it as a telling, as a tale. And while we moved from the art style of like a puppet shadow play kind of style to a more tangible style of like actual animation, actual anime, we're still in a different art style in a way, partially, which to me signals that this is closer to the present. This is closer to us maybe taking it at face value, but we still should keep a healthy distance, right? And some suspension of disbelief as for the details that were happening, right? Because it's still very much, very long in the past and not as recent as our times. It is not in tune with our cultural norms. It is not in tune with the country, actually, because this is like more kind of like European-ish, while our current stories are all in Japan, right? And very seeping in Japanese culture, while this is not. I do love this shot, by the way. I said it in the episode, like the blue hues with the intersected with the green. I really love that, and it sets the atmosphere well for like just the brooding mood that Suicide Master here is in. And we open the door and we see this like shadowy figure. This is a very cool artistic depiction. I would like imagine maybe Shaft doing that, or if it did, the company that this was outsourced to, then good job of actually depicting this in a very creative way. And she's getting very close to the eye. I'm being reminded of stuff like, for example, whatchamacallit, Again, the eye reflection, really cool that they kept that. Of stuff like Technolize, when we have the eye thing in the first episode, or yeah, other kind of body horror kind of thing where we're getting very close to an eye with a sharp object and everybody's like getting squeezy. Because this is one thing I'm like, no, eyes, no. Right? I need my eyes. Thank you very much. As you can see, right? I'm engaging with a lot of visual media, so I can't have that, and that is kind of very close to me. And this is where we have her pushing her on the bed and actually endangering herself by, like, I guess it's silver, right? Touching the silver and burning herself. And she's being thrown on there. And she's been surprised because she's been thrown on there, which is not something people do to her normally because they would be too afraid to damage her, right? But she's very much emotionally involved. She holds her very dear at this point in time, which she doesn't even like to admit herself, but realizes over time here. And this is also a very interesting, like, there's a lot of sexual tension here, right? There's a lot of romantic tension here. She's throwing her onto a bed, right? Being concerned about her. There's like these undertones that are not going too far, right? We're not going right into it, but we're actually subtly hinting at these little tiny sparks that are happening here, at least from the perspective of Deathtopia here. I don't know how Asarola feels about this and how she interacts, because she kind of admires the nature of Suicide Master, because I feel like this is for her also a point of envy, that she acts in a way and presents herself in a boastful way and is acting so superior, which is a thing that is very opposed to who she is, but maybe she wishes she could be more like that, especially even in the beginning, but I think especially now, since they had the goal of, hey, I want to act differently in order to not come across as so beautiful. Even if it's fake, I don't want to come across as beautiful. But she is playing with the idea of actually mutilating herself in order to do that, and she doesn't want that. She wants to keep the beauty, which in a way maybe might be a mistake if you want to go more and more in the direction of not actually representing this beautiful image. But at the same time, obviously it's understandable because she cares about her a lot at this point. You misunderstand. Yeah. Beautiful shot to the eyes again, and we do have that whenever she is kind of losing grip, right? Whenever she's either angry or frustrated or tempted or whatever, we go to that black and white. Never do that again. She's almost losing her temper here. I love all of the talk because, like, if you understand a little bit Japanese, you're starting to understand what she's saying, right? She's going from a watashi to not even a watashi, which would be a normal one, but washi. And later on, she even says ore, which is like very, very like very rude, right? Very like ruffian-esque to say that, ore. She still has a long way to go, right? She's still too polite in all of her like replies when she's not thinking about something. The immediate reply is a very polite one, a very beautiful one, reflecting back what people put on her, right? And even if people are nasty to her, she's just reflecting back with politeness and understanding and all of that. And this is not what she's suggesting here. That it's very hard to change your own behaviors. It's very hard to change who you are. Right? You will notice that when you're living in different areas, right? And you change the area because you're going home for the first time, or you're changing for your job or whatever, and people talk differently in that area, right? And you go back, and for a couple of days or something, you will still talk like you talked in the other area. And then you will adjust and you will talk like that again and be kind of partially even in the mindset again. And then you go back and you talk again like you used to talk all the time here. Right? I'm experiencing that right now personally, so this is like a very poignant topic. Love how she looks up at her. Like, obviously this is her position, right? She's sitting on the bed, but also it demonstrates that she's the teacher in this very situation. And also very interesting what she said in the beginning with the arms crossing, because if she's thinking about something, she was always like pondering, like a poet, right? But here she says, cross your arms, right? First of all, crossing your arms is a very, it's a behavior, like a nonverbal behavior that is very much distancing yourself, right? You do use the arms as kind of a defense mechanism, right? The arms are between you and the other person, and the closed in yourself, closed posture kind of signals the other side that you are not open for whatever they bring on to you, whatever they're saying to you, whatever they they send you away, right? This is a closed, right? Don't get close to me, I'm being defensive, leave me alone kind of posture. Or in this case, the way Deftopia often uses it, she's standing above somebody and closing her. Like, you and me, we're not the same, right? I'm superior to you, I'm above you, I'm not gonna let you tell me anything, right? That is her closing her arms kind of deal. You will notice that when you're talking to people in the beginning, often people might be kind of being away from you in terms of their posture, right? They might not be pointing their body directly at you, even if they look at you. They might be having their feet to the side, right? And when you get more comfortable with somebody, you will notice that they will have more open arms, that they will direct their body more to you, that their feet will point a little bit more at you oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes. And they will be a little bit more casual with you by, for example, leaning back in their chair if they're able to, right? And you will often see also that when you are going into a conversation and you're immediately starting to mirror the way a person sits, right? In a way that you're mirroring exactly the posture they are in when they are opposite of you, this will immediately kind of create some nonverbal connection between the two of you. So it's very interesting how our body posture, how the way we present ourselves to the world, be that chest out, right, very proud, or closed within ourselves, or very open and chill and just, right, casual, how that affects how somebody else opposite of you thinks about you, how they subconsciously perceive you, how they open up to you or close down, right, distance themselves from you. Right here, see, right, very smug smile, and we kind of start seeing how Shinobu acts these days, right? How Kishshot acted too when we met her in Kizu. A direct parallel to how she starts trying to act right here with the kaka, with the smile, the devious smile, with the arms interlocked as some kind of like we're not the same, right? I'm superior to you. I wanted to see that. That is interesting, right? It's like some anatomical drawing kind of style. Burn, normal, and we're going up like to get the ugly face and whatnot. Yeah, I thought there was more to that, but it's cool, like having that style. And I do love how we're zooming in on different parts of her face, especially her eyes and her fangs sometimes, just to symbolize certain things. And you do realize over the course of the episode, she's getting more and more mangled out because she keeps dying of starvation. And like her form is going more and more into herself in order to conserve energy in a way, obviously. We do see that in humans too, right? If a person starts dieting suddenly and not eating anything or barely eating anything anymore, the body you will lose a couple of kilograms, right? Or a couple of pounds. And then after that, the body will be like, shit, I'm not getting enough to eat, right? So what do? I conserve energy, which is you will feel more lethargic, you will feel more exhausted, you will need more sleep, you will move slower even if you not immediately realize that. You will have less energy because your body is restricting the energy you have in order to save it up because they don't know when they will get the next bout of energy, right? And how much it will be. Also very interesting how we're playing with myths when we do like the kiss of the kiss shot and how we're kind of paralleling that to kind of the princess stories where they get woken up by a prince. And this is maybe even like Deftopia's wish in a way where she's like, maybe we should leave that in as kind of a superstition, as like a ward, which perpetuates this idea that we had in Monogatari in general, but also I think in a lot of like Eastern myths, that even if something turns out to be just a fairy tale or a myth, the very thought of it that goes into it and the general assumption that people have of that certain aspect of that certain myth can already give power to that myth, to that word and whatnot. And the word itself can act as kind of as a charm or as something to ward off something evil, even though the thing in itself might not have truth to it. There is like and like the power of the warding charm is kind of directly related to how much people actually believe in it, right? How much they believe in the superstition. So if people are like almost convinced that this is the case, it might be a super, super powerful charm, and if people are barely convinced, but there's still some kind of connotation in it within the language or culture, then it's like a small little protective charm, right? So that's the way I see it. Love how we use like the class reflection of especially her back, which is like, the outfit is amazing. Woman who has a beautiful gleaming heart like a sword from the Orient, right? Heart under blade. But also, interestingly enough, we do have the second aspect of this, which is the heart is under the blade. First comes the blade, right? First she hurts you, and second is it is the heart that is underneath that we do hope will maybe at some point in time get that relief, get that kiss from the prince. A lot of like, I wonder what Orion is, and we'll have to look that up maybe in before the next episode. And Tropical-esque kills himself, which weak ass dude. I'm sorry, fucking extra. I love how we paint the atmosphere here. Everything in absolute red, and we're really painting it out, right? There's so much that goes into that. Head, lungs, liver, fingers, hand, eyeball, stomach, chest, heart, tongue, shoulder, and then it just goes into one continuous string of names, and she's just eating it all in, and it's being digested within her. But for her, like, this is something that Asarola herself recognizes as something very beautiful, which is she consumes all of the things she kills, be that voluntary, involuntary, all the things that die, in order to not make it wasteful. She's not a wasteful person. She doesn't like to be wasteful. And here's where we have this ominous atmosphere of like the red kind of contrasting to the cold blue, right? The bright hot red with the cold blue. And she's developing that idea. Her entirely in black, in shadow. This is the most impressive part of the episode. In black, in shadow, in the red. And she's suggesting, make me a vampire, right? And the glass cracks, and I will take responsibility. This is a beautiful thought to me. I will eat up. And she's being beautiful, which is not what she's supposed to do in order to dispel this thing, but this is what she does, right? And this is her nature, and she can barely change it, but this is how she sees that. She's also, as I said, she's prolonging her life, right, in order to have more time to figure out a way to amend this, right, to find redemption, which I also think is very cool. And then we have a full blood moon going on as we're happening this, and she's almost completely mangled. I love this shot, which is like reminiscing. It almost reminds me of some stuff of like a horror castle thing, where we do have like the fisheye lens that shows both sides of the hallway, and we have everything seeped in red. Shadows being here behind us, right? Almost like a bat, as we see like projected onto the stairs, kind of. And now we switch, and we're suddenly cold, and we're like serene. We're like above human, right? And this is like the murals that are on the glass stained window, which is, yeah, absolutely beautiful. And her wearing a red dress, which is kind of symbolic as well, but really going into that theme. And she's looking very, very beautiful here and sexy, and yeah, right. I guess this is maybe also a little bit point of view of Deftopia herself, right? How she sees her at this point. Yeah, and then we get to this scene, which is, I think, also like the second most beautiful and most integral scene of the entire show. I love how we're zooming in from like a almost 3D-ish moon into the structure that is building itself, right? And we see where we look at from here. The moon is so superhumanly large, it's insane. And she's like, again, we do have these shots that are very reminiscent of what we see today with like Shinobu and Kiss Shot and whatnot. She having one eye closed and the other eye showing, and one half of the face in shadow, much like Deftopia, and the other in light. And we do have this beautiful, beautiful white dress. I may be inexperienced, but I leave myself in your care. It almost sounds like they're having sex for the first time, right? Which is very, very interesting. And she's kind of presenting her neck. And like she said later, like, right, Suicide Master says that herself, she's like, loving and eating are one and the same thing for her and for vampires in the end. With courage that an inexperienced individual would never have, right? Indeed, it's too much of a waste for you to remain human. I will do my best to meet your expectations, my master. But Vararuchi-sama, I don't know if that's exactly correct, but in that way, kind of, right? Which is what she says to Aragi at this point in time. I find very, very interesting. I do wonder if there's some admiration there, right? You know, we're admiring in a way Aragi, right? The way he is and whatnot, much as she admires Deftopia right here. And I do think like they're doing their best to really act it out. I think 90% of what they're saying here is actually meant that way and there's real feelings behind it, but also I think like 10% of that is just acting it up, amplifying it, and pointing it in a way that there's no doubt as to what their relationship is and how they're approaching this, because they need to sell it to themselves. They need to sell to themselves this idea that this is something that is good for her, that is in her favor. Otherwise, Deftopia cannot actually do it. She can't fulfill it, because if she would in any fiber of her being believe that this is in some way harmful to Acerola, it would mean that she would, before she even manages to do it, end up killing herself again. Just because you're going to be my minion doesn't mean you have to speak that way. I will abolish slavery as of Tropical-esque. He would be my final slave. You're not my slave, you're my family member, right? Maybe you're my legacy in a way. I would, and I think she means it that way, and she looks beautiful in that, right? Like a real princess, I would assume. And what should I call you? The way you always called me. I want you to become a vampire I can be proud of, and maybe she became one, right? From like the legends and what she's heard. And every shot of this like last sequence is absolutely great. Like, I mean, I think the environments are still kind of being not as impressive, but at the same time, everything else, like the way we look at people, right? The shot from down to upwards. She's like, I trust you, and she's like, trust, don't make me laugh. I'm a monster. I'm sure it's a virtue to believe in people, but I'm not a human, right? She's like, I'm a monster, don't believe in me, right? Don't believe in people, believe in humans, but I'm not a human. She's like, but I'm trying to become the same thing, so yeah. Just like you, a cool, tough, and kind but beautiful vampire. This is, like I said, this is so fucking interesting how she sees her, because from the outset it would be like, maybe she's like a monster in a way, right? She's like terrible. People perceive her as such, like a vampire, a bloodsucker, a parasite, somebody who's like above humans, right? And then oppressing them maybe even. But for her, the way she experienced her, the way she has gotten to know her is, she is cool, right? She's composed. She's tough to the outside. She has that attitude. But she's kind and beautiful to her, right? In her eyes. And this is where we see like some of that reciprocation when it comes to feelings. Even if maybe the other side is not as strong. But she admires her at the very least. We do have that clean split between dark and light. And the moon is absolutely, it's not even a structure anymore, right? It's not even a white structure anymore. It just kind of merges with the blue night sky. Princess Acerola is shot. Acerola Orion Heart in the Blade. That's your name. Eat all those people who die for you as if you were kissing them, right? That's another meaning of the kiss. Want to gain eternal life and live for a long time. Perhaps you may someday meet a praiseworthy prince. And I do wonder who that would be, right? We do have the first. We do have Araragi. I don't know if either one of them could be considered a prince, but I guess in a way, like the prince waking the princess from her slumber would be, in this case, Araragi marking an end to Shinobu's quest for salvation, for redemption, because this is how she sees, like, this is for her, as we see in Nisamonogatari when they have that talk while in the bath, when they say, like, this is kind of a poetic end for me, and this is what I want, right? To spend the rest of my life with you, and if my life ends tomorrow, if your life ends tomorrow, mine ends. And if my life ends tomorrow, yours ends. And this is what they say again at the very end of the story to one another. And in this sense, it kind of makes perfect sense, right? But the question is maybe... I feel like maybe she wanted to be that prince as well, right? Suicide Master. If they meet again one day. I do love like the hand things. I don't know how you call them, but the almost glove-like things that are just on one hand. Yeah, like I said, like it's very wedding dressy. But I love how we how we kept the blue ribbon that she had in her hair. She's like, I adore it. And she gives her full name, Virtuoso. Be diligent. We have to zoom up again. This is my final lesson, right? And she teaches her how to laugh if she truly feels happy, which I need to look back, but I wonder if she ever did that. And everything is beautiful and glittering. And this is clearly kind of Suicide Master's perspective. I think her point of view, that everything is glittering and shiny, and this is this beautiful union of them, both of them, and just like this transition, and everything is crashing around them. It's much like when we see like at the very end of Owari with Aragi and the end that we have. Everything is just breaking down. But I guess it's also symbolism in a way, because this is the end of their relationship together, the end of their time together, and it's like the structure of the previous Asarola Hime breaking, going over into her new identity, her identity as Kiss Shot. But she remains beautiful in every one of these shots. Like, look at that. Shiny, almost plastic in a way, right? The skin. But also kind of almost happy, you would say, right? Hopeful. And this is how we end it. And we have the 360 spin zoom in. Holy. That is cool. That is really cool. And then we go up. And we zoom out, right? We lose perspective. It's done, and the castle breaks apart. This is the end of her time here as well, probably, because they will be moving. But we see her in the epilogue, we see them both traveling. And they both have, like, the vampire wings now, which means... And she's, like, a beautiful, like, almost... She looks, like, more mature here, which means she has a more powerful form again. And so the noble girl who once was called Laura, which is like a great reveal, because there's like probably one of the only people who ever knew how she was originally called, and we know it too now. We're prone to this because she's telling the story. The princess who was once called a beautiful princess became the vampire by the name of Kishot Asarola Orion Hard on the Blade, right? And this is how we know, like the bridge, very nice. We crossed the bridge. Just as planned, she became a monster who ate humans. Interesting, because like the bridge crossing, for me, that is synonymous with traveling the lands, which is exactly what they want to express here. She was, right, Suicide Master was then going on and traveling the lands, right? Going on her own journey. In any case, this is a story from roughly 600 years ago. It's no longer a way to uncover the truth. I've only heard rumors of what she's been doing afterwards, and this is like also a beautiful shot, look at that. But she looks a lot more mature here. Only heard rumors of what happens afterwards. But as predicted, she became a magnificent vampire, right? Iron-blooded, hot-blooded, cold-blooded, and her story got passed on, right? With the two golden eyes and even the painting here with the castle in the back. Wonder if that's in canon or if that's just a way to tell the story, right? Be like, there's been rumors of her. She made her own legacy. But she's kind of like hanging here, almost like she's hanging on their time together, right? Their first meeting place. It's like you lost a lover and, right, you lost a partner, a significant other, and they left you or something, right? And then the relationship broke apart, and now you're lingering at the old places that you used to be and reminiscing about the times when you were together. It almost feels like that, and she's no other way to waste her time. Also, very interestingly, we see her in her more mature form, and then we go back to her with the traveling the lands and whatnot, and her hanging around, and we see her in the small form again. So what I'm seeing in my mind's eye, what I'm kind of feeling like, is that this is basically her being, like, us as the audience being prone to the fact that she's been starving herself after this again, right? Maybe only eating when she absolutely has to, because she, like, her last meal, in a way, her last, like, when she sucked blood and made Asarola a vampire, was so beautiful to her, and she's still hanging, clinging on to that she doesn't really want to eat more than she has to anymore. Right? Almost very sad, right? Almost like she's having a date with her, right? Drinking the blood and having 2 glasses. Yeah, and this is how it ends, and she's like, maybe I should visit her again and see how she's doing. right? And then we're coming back with that, and hopefully she won't be jealous of Araragi or whatnot. I'm very excited if we see Araragi in like this last part of the season, actually, or how we're gonna do this, right? How this is gonna go down, because this is gonna be a confrontation between Shinobu in her current form and Deftopia in her current form, both of them being in a very lolly-esque form at this point. But yeah, I guess that's it. I can't say any more or much more about this, and I don't want to say much more about this. We're gonna end it right here, and I'm gonna figure out if we're gonna do this in one episode, in one really long episode, or if we're gonna do that in 2 episodes. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, leave me a like and subscribe. Patreon does have the full-length reaction on there for free members if you want to see that. Other than that, we do have some other cool stuff. Check out my channel, see what is in there for you. We have a Discord that you can join that is not very active, but hopefully will one day become very active. And I'll be seeing you next time with hopefully a very, very exciting episode to watch.